The Pandronian war cannons smashed through the fragile human defenses, annihilating everything in their path and painting the ground crimson with blood. The aliens were just toying with their prey before the real slaughter began. Military klaxons blared through the command center as Commander Jake James gripped the edges of the holotable, knuckles white with tension. He watched helplessly as the unknown alien ships tore apart the remote human colony, an icy sensation gripping his gut. First contact was always a gamble, but he had never imagined a scenario this disastrous. The distress beacon had only just lit up when the colony went dark, disappearing into an ominous void. Jake clenched his jaw. He had to find out what the hell was going on out there. As he dug into the fragmentary data, a grim picture emerged. The aliens, a mysterious race called the Pandronians, had been secretly observing humanity for years. Led by a ruthless warlord named Taurus, they had deemed Earth an easy conquest, a primitive planet ripe for the taking by their superior technology and military might. But that remote colony had just been their opening salvo. Reports flooded in of Pandronian shock troops brutally wiping out human outposts across the frontier. Men, women, children, all mercilessly slaughtered as the aliens blitzed from one settlement to the next. The horrific images seared into Jake's mind. The stakes crystallized with sobering clarity. This was no border skirmish. Earth itself was in the crosshairs of a vast, ravenous empire. And if humanity failed to muster an immediate and overwhelming defense, their homeworld would burn, billions would perish, and the human race itself could face extinction. As Jake scoured his network of contacts for any shred of intel on this terrifying new adversary, the fragments painted a dire picture. The Pandronians were a hyper-advanced, ferociously aggressive civilization that lived for conquest and slaughter. Over centuries, they had subjugated world after world, crushing all resistance with a mixture of technological supremacy and merciless cruelty, manipulating, betraying, dividing, and overwhelming their foes was a vicious art they had perfected. And now Taurus had set his malevolent gaze on Earth. For the Pandronian warlord, this wasn't just the latest conquest. It was a matter of pride, a chance to prove his empire's superiority by crushing humanity underfoot in a brutally efficient invasion. An invasion Jake now knew was hurtling towards Earth at terrifying speed. Military command was in chaos. Politicians dithered and blustered. But Jake cut through it all with grim resolve. Earth's survival hinged on immediately mobilizing every military resource to resist the coming onslaught. By the time the Pandronian war fleet arrived in force, humanity's defenses had to be impenetrable. Their counterstrike had to be decisive. Charging into the command center, he confronted Earth's leaders with the direness of their plight. The squabbling faded into stunned silence as he laid out the brutality of the Pandronian threat, unflinching. To have any chance, Earth needed to be united under a single banner, a single strategy. As one of the most battle-hardened commanders alive, that burden had to fall to him. With grim reluctance, they tasked Jake with forging an elite global defense force to take the fight to the Pandronians, and he wasted no time. Racing the ticking clock of the impending invasion, Jake worked feverishly to assemble the brightest military minds and most skilled fighters Earth had to offer. Soldiers, scientists, and engineers pored over the scraps of alien technology for any clues to the Pandronians' weaknesses. Factories churned, recruiters rushed to swell the ranks of Earth's defenders, and Jake drilled his forces without mercy. All the while, tightening the web of planetary defenses into a steel trap that just might give the Pandronians pause. Missile silos, orbital weapon platforms, early warning systems. Jake ensured no expense was spared in fortifying Earth for the horrors to come. And as the first alien scouts began to probe the edges of the solar system, he steeled himself to make the announcement Earth had never hoped to hear. They were at war, and the future of the human race itself hung in the balance. The terror was palpable, but so was the groundswell of defiant human spirit. With failure meaning extinction, Jake locked eyes with his reflection as he prepared to address all humanity. The weight of responsibility crashed down on him with crushing force. The Pandronians were coming, led by a brutal warlord hell-bent on grinding Earth under his heel. The survival of the human race now depended on Jake's brilliance, leadership, and resolve in the greatest conflict the planet had ever seen. Never before had the phrase "failure is not an option" carried such momentous stakes. Jake took a deep breath, knowing he would move mountains or die trying before he let the Pandronians snuff out humanity's future. The road ahead would be paved in blood and sacrifice, but surrender was not a word in Jake's vocabulary. It was time to show these alien bastards what human courage, tenacity, and sheer grit looked like. No matter how advanced they were, the Pandronians were about to learn the depths of their mistake in underestimating humanity. Jake and his forces would make damn sure of that. Jake's grim perseverance was put to the test sooner than he expected. The klaxons blared through Titan Base as Pandronian warships materialized from the inky void of space. Taurus himself led the charge, his flagship's cannons blazing with alien energy that tore through the base's outer defenses seamlessly. "Scramble all fighters! Get those shield generators online now!" Jake barked into the comms, his fingers flying over holographic displays as he tried to coordinate a defense. But he knew reinforcements wouldn't arrive in time. This was going to get ugly fast. Meanwhile, out on Titan's desolate surface, Sergeant Mike Hudson and his squad froze in their tracks as the sky lit up with explosions. "Holy shit," Private Rodriguez whispered, his breath fogging up his helmet. "They found us." Hudson's mind raced. They were cut off, outgunned, with no hope of support, but damned if they were going down without a fight. "All right, ladies, time to show these alien bastards what happens when they pick a fight with humanity. We're going guerrilla. Use the terrain. Use their tech against them. Buy time for evac. Move." The squad scattered, using Titan's rocky outcroppings and methane geysers for cover. When Pandronian dropships disgorged waves of shock troops, Hudson's team was ready. They rigged explosive traps, sabotaged alien equipment, and led the invaders on wild chases through treacherous canyons. Back at Earth Command, Jake watched the feeds with growing horror. Titan Base was being overrun. He knew what had to be done, but the weight of the decision crushed down on him. With a heavy heart, he gave the order. Initiate Scorched Earth Protocol. Detonate the reactors. The explosion rocked Titan to its core. A third of Taurus's Vanguard fleet went up in flames, but at a terrible cost. Hudson's squad was caught in the blast radius. By the time the last evac shuttle lifted off, only a handful of survivors remained. Hudson himself was barely conscious, his armor cracked and bloody. On his flagship, Taurus seethed with rage. This was supposed to be an easy conquest, yet these primitives had bloodied his nose. "Analyze their defenses," he snarled at his subordinates. "Find their weaknesses. We will crush these insects beneath our heels." Jake knew they'd bought only a brief reprieve. Earth needed a win, something to rally around. When Hudson's shuttle docked, Jake rushed to meet the battered hero. Despite his wounds, Hudson's eyes blazed with defiance. "Sir," he rasped, "we disabled one of their frigates. It's drifting out there, ripe for the taking." Jake's mind raced with possibilities. If they could secure that ship and its tech. "Prep a retrieval team," he ordered. "This could be our shot at evening the odds." But even as the daring mission launched, dire news reached Jake's ears. Pandronian scout ships had breached the inner solar system. Earth itself was now in the crosshairs. The real war was about to begin. Jake James stared out the viewport at the massive Pandronian frigate drifting in the void. Its hull bore scorch marks and hull breaches from the clash with Hudson's squad. He turned to his assembled team of commandos and techs. "All right, people, we've got one shot at this. That ship holds the key to Earth's survival. We board, we secure, we extract. No heroics. Clear?" A chorus of "Yes, sir," rang out. Jake nodded to his old friend, Dr. Alex Novak. The engineer gave a thumbs up, his gear laden with exotic scanning equipment. Their stealth shuttle glided silently towards the alien vessel. As they docked, Jake's pulse quickened. "Breach in 3, 2, 1. The airlock blew, and they stormed in. Immediately, alien weaponry lit up the corridor. Jake dove for cover as energy blasts seared the bulkhead beside him. "Push forward," he bellowed, returning fire. His team advanced methodically, securing junction after junction, but the Pandronians fought viciously to defend their ship. Private Chen took a hit to the leg and went down screaming. Corporal Reeves dragged him to safety as Jake laid down covering fire. They were taking losses, but couldn't afford to fail. Jake's tactical mind raced, analyzing Pandronian movements. He noticed a pattern in their defensive formations. "Torres, Guzman, flank left on my mark. The rest of you suppressing fire." His gambit paid off. They caught the aliens in a crossfire, breaking their last line of defense. Jake's boots pounded on alien deck plating as they charged the bridge. "Clear," Jake announced moments later, the bridge secured. He turned to Novak. "Do your thing, Doc. Clock's ticking." Novak's fingers flew over alien consoles, interfacing Earth tech with Pandronian systems. "Jesus," he muttered. "The processing power on this thing, it's cracking our best encryption without effort." Jake peered over his shoulder as star maps and fleet movements scrolled by. His blood ran cold. There's more of them than we thought. A lot more. Back on Earth, chaos reigned. Pandronian scouts strafed population centers, sowing terror. Emergency broadcasts blared as smoke rose from burning cities. In the war room, Jake laid out his desperate plan to Earth's leaders. "We hit them where they least expect it, in their own territory. Cut off their supply lines, delay the invasion." There were murmurs of dissent. "It's suicide," one general protested. Jake's fist slammed the table. "And what do you call sitting here waiting to die? This is our only shot." After heated debate, they reluctantly agreed. Jake turned to Novak. "How soon can you get that alien drive tech working on our ships?" Novak ran a hand through his hair. "Jake, it's not that simple. This tech is light years beyond us. One wrong calculation and we could blow ourselves to atoms." "Then don't make a wrong calculation," Jake said firmly. "Earth's counting on you, old friend." As Jake's strike force prepared to depart, he addressed his crew. "What we're about to do, penetrating deep into enemy space, cut off from all support, it's never been done before, but neither has a Pandronian invasion of Earth. We make history today, one way or another." With a final salute to those staying behind, Jake's ships vanished into the void, bound for Pandronian space. The next moves in this cosmic chess game would determine the fate of humanity. Meanwhile, aboard his Titanic flagship, Taurus raged at his subordinates. "How did they disable one of our frigates? How did they board it? Find me answers, or I'll find new officers who can." He glowered at the holographic display of Earth. "No matter. Soon we will crush their pathetic defenses and grind their civilization to dust. And I will personally ensure Commander Jake James dies screaming." Lieutenant Sam Weston stood rigid at the command console, his eyes fixed on the holographic display as it flickered with incoming data. The outer defense grid, Earth's first line of protection, erupted in a cascade of red warning indicators. "Pandronian warships breaching Jupiter's orbit," an analyst shouted, her voice tight with fear. Weston's stomach clenched. This was the moment they dreaded since Jake's departure. He keyed the comms. "All ships, battle stations. This is not a drill." The massive Pandronian battleship emerged from the void like a nightmare given form. Its hull bristled with weapon ports that spewed forth searing beams of energy. Human vessels crumpled and burst into flames under the onslaught. "Sir, the Dauntless and Intrepid are gone," a tactical officer reported, his voice shaking. "The Montana's taken heavy damage." Weston's mind raced. Their weapons barely scratched the alien behemoth. He punched the emergency broadcast. "All major cities, initiate evacuation protocols immediately. This is not..." A blinding flash cut him off as the Pandronian vessel obliterated another defender. Weston's fists clenched. They were out of options. "Launch everything we've got. Every missile, every fighter. Hit that bastard with everything." The counterattack was fierce but futile. Missiles exploded harmlessly against the battleship's shields. Fighters were swatted from the sky like insects. Just as hope seemed lost, Sergeant Hudson burst onto the command deck, panting heavily. "Sir, the captured frigate. There's data on their weak points." Weston's eyes widened. "Get it to the missile silos now!" Hudson's fingers flew over the console, inputting the vital targeting data. Weston held his breath as a fresh salvo of nukes streaked towards the Pandronian monster. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then, explosions blossomed across the battleship's hull. It listed to one side, fires erupting from its wounded flanks. A ragged cheer went up, but Weston's relief was short-lived. The radar lit up with new contacts. "More hostiles inbound. They're pouring through the breach." The sky above Earth became a maelstrom of energy weapons and explosions. Human defenders fought with desperate courage, but they were hopelessly outgunned. Just then, Dr. Novak's voice crackled over the comms. "Weston, I've cracked it. The Pandronian drives. We can outfit our remaining ships." A spark of hope ignited in Weston's chest. "Do it. Fast. We need every advantage we can get." As Novak's team worked feverishly to upgrade their vessels, Weston launched a series of hit-and-run attacks. The newly enhanced ships danced nimbly through the Pandronian formations, their sudden maneuvers catching the aliens off guard. A Pandronian cruiser vanished in a nuclear fireball as a kamikaze strike found its mark. Moments later, a squad of Earth fighters materialized behind an enemy frigate, tearing it apart with a barrage of missiles. But for every Pandronian ship they destroyed, 10 more seemed to take its place. The sheer weight of numbers was overwhelming. "Sir," a grim-faced officer reported, "the outer defenses are gone. They're pushing towards low orbit." Weston's fists tight. "Fall back to the inner defense line. We hold here, no matter the consequences." As Earth's battered fleet regrouped for a final stand, Dr. Novak burst onto the command deck. "Lieutenant, I've done it. Fully reverse-engineered their hyperdrive." Weston's eyes widened. "Can we bring Jake's team back?" Before Novak could answer, alarms blared. The main view screen showed a terrifying sight: Pandronian battle groups in high orbit, weapons charging. Weston's voice was steel as he gave the order. "All ships, all weapons, fire at will. For Earth." The sky lit up as humanity unleashed its fury in one last desperate assault. Light years away, Jake James picked himself up from the wreckage of his crashed ship, the alien landscape of a Pandronian world stretching before him. With relentless drive, he checked his weapon and survival gear. "All right, team," he addressed the battered survivors. "Let's find a way off this rock and get back home. Earth needs us." Jake James wiped sweat and grime from his brow as he surveyed the alien landscape. Twisted vegetation writhed in the harsh wind, and strange, multi-limbed creatures skittered across the rocky terrain. The wreckage of their ship lay scattered behind them, smoke still rising from its ruined hull. "All right, listen up," Jake called to his battered crew. "Our ride's toast, but we're not dead yet. We've got one shot at getting off this rock." He pointed to the ship's exposed hyperdrive core, its intricate circuitry still pulsing with energy. "We're going to cannibalize that drive and build a transmitter. It's our only chance of signaling for help." Private Rodriguez stepped forward, his face caked with dried blood. "Sir, with all due respect, that's insane. We don't have the tools or the know-how to—" A bone-chilling shriek cut him off. In the distance, a massive reptilian creature reared up on its hind legs, its maw filled with rows of serrated teeth. "We don't have a choice," Jake snapped. "Now move!" The team sprang into action. They stripped wiring from consoles, repurposed power cells, and cobbled together makeshift tools from the debris. All the while, the local wildlife circled closer, drawn by the scent of blood and the promise of easy prey. Corporal Chen yelped as a viciously clawed appendage swiped at him from the undergrowth. Jake blasted it with his plasma rifle, sending the creature scurrying away with an otherworldly howl. "Stay alert," Jake barked. "Rodriguez, Liu, perimeter watch. The rest of you keep working on that transmitter." Hours passed in a blur of frantic activity. Jake's hands bled as he spliced delicate wiring, ignoring the gnawing hunger and thirst that plagued them all. Twice, They had to stop to fend off attacks from the planet's increasingly bold predators. Just as Jake connected the final component, a low rumble filled the air. His blood ran cold as he recognized the sound of Pandronian dropships. "They're here," he hissed. "Everyone, take cover!" The team scrambled for concealment as alien vessels screamed overhead. Jake huddled behind a twisted hunk of metal, praying their cobbled-together transmitter would work. Back in Earth's orbit, Lieutenant Weston gritted his teeth as another human cruiser exploded in a silent fireball. His fleet was being torn apart, but they'd managed to bloody the Pandronian's nose. "Sir!" a tactical officer shouted. "We've taken out 3 of their capital ships." Weston nodded grimly. "Keep pressing the attack. We can't let up now." But even as he spoke, fresh waves of Pandronian fighters poured from their carriers. Human ships blinked out of existence one by one, overwhelmed by the sheer numbers of the alien horde. Weston's hands clenched into fists. They were losing. Earth's last line of defense was crumbling before his eyes. Suddenly, Dr. Novak's voice crackled over the comms. "Weston, we've done it! The hyperdrive tech is online!" As if to punctuate his words, a group of human frigates vanished, only to reappear an instant later behind the Pandronian lines. They opened fire, catching the aliens completely off guard. More human ships joined the fray, blinking in and out of existence faster than the Pandronians could track. For the first time since the battle began, Weston allowed himself a glimmer of hope. "All ships," he ordered, "utilize the new drive systems. Hit them hard and fast." The tide of battle shifted as human vessels danced through space, striking from impossible angles and vanishing before the aliens could respond. Pandronian ships exploded left and right, their formations thrown into chaos. In the midst of the carnage, a weak signal pinged on Novak's console. His eyes widened as he deciphered its origin. "Lieutenant," he shouted, "it's Jake! We found him!" Weston's face hardened. "We can't spare any ships. The battle here is too critical." Novak's voice grew urgent. "You don't understand. Jake has a plan to hit the Pandronians where it hurts. He can end this war if we get him off that planet." For a long moment, Weston said nothing. Then he nodded sharply. "Do it, but make it fast. We can't hold out here forever." As a small rescue fleet prepared to jump, alarms blared across the command center. A massive Pandronian armada had just emerged from hyperspace, led by a colossal flagship that dwarfed anything they'd seen before. Weston's blood ran cold as he recognized the vessel. "It's Taurus," he breathed. "God help us all." The void of space erupted in a dazzling display of firepower as Taurus's armada materialized at the edge of the solar system. Massive Pandronian warships, their hulls jam-packed with weaponry, advanced inexorably towards Earth's battered defenses. Lieutenant Weston's face was etched with grim dedication as he surveyed the tactical display. "Divert all remaining ships to cover the rescue op," he ordered, his voice steady despite the dire situation. "We need to buy Jake's team every second we can." Human vessels, vastly outnumbered and outgunned, darted between the colossal Pandronian ships. They blinked in and out of existence, their newly acquired hyperdrive technology allowing for impossible maneuvers. A human frigate materialized behind a Pandronian cruiser, unleashed a barrage of missiles, then vanished before retaliatory fire could find its mark. On the bridge of his flagship, Taurus seethed with rage. "Insolent vermin," he roared, smashing a console with his massive fist. "I will crush every last one of them." Meanwhile, on the alien world, Jake James and his team trudged across the hostile terrain. Strange, multi-limbed creatures scurried away from their approach. The air was thick with an acrid smell that burned their nostrils. "Contact!" Private Rodriguez shouted, pointing to the sky. A ship was descending rapidly, its hull emblazoned with Earth's insignia. Jake's relief was short-lived. As the rescue ship touched down, a hail of energy bolts erupted from the twisted vegetation. Pandronian scouts had been lying in wait. "Take cover!" Jake bellowed, diving behind a rocky outcropping. He returned fire, his plasma rifle spitting superheated death at the alien ambushers. The air filled with the screams of wounded men and the chittering of the planet's fauna, drawn by the commotion. Jake's team fought with desperate intensity, their survival instincts heightened by days of constant peril. As the firefight raged, Dr. Novak's voice crackled over Jake's comm unit. "Commander, we've made a breakthrough. We can use the hyperdrive to jump directly into Pandronian space." Jake ducked as an energy bolt sizzled overhead. "How is that possible?" he shouted over the din of battle. "The hyperspace corridors," Novak explained breathlessly. "We can thread our way through gravitational anomalies, bypassing Taurus's fleet entirely." Jake's mind raced. It was insanely risky, but it might be their only shot at turning the tide. "Do it," he ordered. "We'll rendezvous at the extraction point." With a final push, Jake's team broke through the Pandronian lines. They sprinted for the waiting ship, alien projectiles kicking up dirt at their heels. As Jake's team lifted off, the battle for Earth reached its crescendo. Lieutenant Weston watched helplessly as the last of his fighters succumbed to the overwhelming Pandronian assault. Taurus's voice boomed across all frequencies. "Your defiance ends now, humans. Watch as I reduce your world to ash." Pandronian ships achieved orbital superiority, their weapons trained on Earth's surface. Cities went dark as electromagnetic pulses swept across continents. The first salvos of the orbital bombardment began to fall. But far from Earth, deep in the cosmic maelstrom, Jake's ships emerged from their daring hyperspatial jump. Before them lay the heart of the Pandronian Empire. Taurus's shipyards and supply depots spread out across an entire star system. Jake's voice was steel as he addressed his strike force. "Hit them hard and fast. We cut off the head of the snake here and now." Human vessels surged forward, catching the unprepared Pandronian defenders completely off guard. Missiles streaked towards fuel depots, setting off chain reactions of spectacular explosions. Sabotage teams beamed aboard shipyards, planting charges on half-constructed warships. Within hours, the carefully orchestrated assault had thrown the Pandronian war machine into chaos. Jake allowed himself a grim smile as he watched another supply station erupt into flames. But their victory was far from assured. Taurus, enraged beyond reason, diverted what ships he could spare from the Earth assault. "I want James's head!" he roared to his commanders. "Crush these vermin once and for all." As Pandronian reinforcements began to arrive, Jake knew their window of opportunity was closing. He set his sights on the gleaming jewel at the center of the system, Taurus's imperial throne world. "All ships," he ordered, his voice calm despite the stakes. "Prepare for final approach. We end this now." The human fleet accelerated towards their target, volleys of alien weapons fire erupting around them. Jake gripped the arms of his command chair, knowing that the next few moments would determine the fate of two civilizations. Jake's strike force plunged deeper into Pandronian territory, the alien system's twin suns casting an eerie glow on their hull plating. Sweat beaded on Jake's brow as he studied the tactical display. Red icons swarmed around their position, closing in from all sides. "Sir, Pandronian vessels closing fast." Lieutenant Chen's voice cracked with tension. Jake's fingers flew across the command console. "Evasive pattern Delta. All ships, focus fire on their lead cruiser." Human ships scattered like startled birds, plasma beams lancing out to score hits on the approaching Pandronian fleet. The alien cruiser's shields flared and failed, its hull buckling under the concentrated assault. But for every ship they destroyed, two more took its place. Jake gritted his teeth as damage reports flooded in. They were bleeding, and badly. A proximity alarm shrieked. Jake's eyes widened as he saw the cause. A sleek black vessel, unlike any they'd encountered before. "Praetorian Guard!" Chen shouted. "They've locked on!" The Praetorian ship struck with lightning speed. Boarding pods erupted from its flanks, slamming into the human vessels. Jake heard the sickening crunch of metal on metal as one latched onto their hull. "Repel boarders!" Jake barked into the ship-wide comm. He snatched up his plasma rifle, heart pounding as he raced toward the breach point. The corridor filled with acrid smoke as the Praetorians cut through the airlock. Jake's team took up defensive positions, weapons trained on the sparking metal. With a thunderous boom, the airlock gave way. Pandronian warriors poured through, their chitinous armor gleaming in the emergency lights. Jake opened fire, his rifle spitting superheated death. The air filled with plasma bolts and alien shrieks. Jake ducked as a Praetorian blade whistled past his head, feeling the heat of its energy field singe his hair. He fired point blank into the creature's face, its carapace shattering under the impact. "Fall back!" Jake ordered as more Praetorians swarmed in. "Seal off sections 3 through 7. His team retreated, firing as they went. Emergency bulkheads slammed down, buying them precious seconds. Jake's comm crackled to life. Dr. Novak's voice came through, strained and filled with static. "Jake, Earth, under heavy bombardment. Weston, evacuating civilians. We need you. Running out of time." The words hit Jake like a physical blow. He stared at the blood-smeared bulkhead, the sounds of Praetorians trying to cut through echoing in his ears. "Understood," Jake replied, his voice hollow. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what came next. "All ships, this is Commander James. New orders." Jake laid out his plan, splitting their forces. As he spoke, he locked eyes with Gunnery Sergeant Hudson. The grizzled veteran nodded, understanding passing between them without words. "Good luck, Mike," Jake said as Hudson's team prepared to make their stand. "Give 'em hell, sir," Hudson replied, clasping Jake's arm. Jake's remaining ships disengaged, their engines flaring as they punched out of the system. He input the complex slipstream calculations himself, double and triple checking each figure. "All hands, brace for jump." Reality twisted around them as they plunged into the chaotic depths of slipspace. Jake's fingers tightened as he gripped his chair, willing their rickety formation to hold together. Ships screamed and buckled around him. Alarms blared as hull integrity warnings flashed across every screen. Jake watched in horror as 2 of his frigates simply vanished, torn apart by the turbulent slipstream. They emerged into real space in a maelstrom of fractured metal and venting atmosphere. Jake's sensors came back online, revealing a terrifying sight. They'd appeared in the midst of Taurus's blockade. "All functioning ships attack Pattern Omega!" Jake shouted. "We punch through here and now!" Human vessels surged forward, guns blazing. Pandronian ships wheeled to meet this unexpected threat, energy weapons carving lines of fire through the void. Jake's fighter screamed past capital punishment guns, his targeting computer locking onto a Pandronian frigate. He fired, watching with grim satisfaction as his missiles found their mark. "Push forward," he ordered as they clawed their way through the enemy formation. "Earth needs us. Jake's flagship burst out of slipspace, its hull groaning from the strain. Alarms blared as Pandronian weapons fire immediately peppered their shields. "All ships, evasive maneuvers," Jake shouted, his fingers flying across the tactical display. "Concentrate fire on their lead destroyers." Human vessels scattered, unleashing a barrage of missiles and plasma bolts. Explosions blossomed across space as they struck home, but the sheer number of Pandronian ships threatened to overwhelm them. "Sir, incoming transmission from Earth," Lieutenant Chen called out. Weston's haggard face appeared on the screen. "Jake, thank God you're here. But it's bad. The Pandronians have started bombing population centers. We're looking at millions dead if we can't stop them." Jake's eyebrows furrowed. "Understood. We're going to hit them where it hurts. Prep your ground defenses. We're about to give you an opening." As Jake's fleet pushed through the blockade, linking up with Earth's battered defenders, Taurus's enraged voice boomed across all frequencies. "Crush them. I want every human ship atomized." More Pandronian capital ships turned to engage, their massive forms blotting out the stars. But deep in Pandronian space, Hudson's team was wreaking havoc. "Another fuel depot down," Hudson reported, his voice crackling with static. "We've taken out 3 resupply stations in the last hour." Jake allowed himself a grim smile. "Keep it up, Mike. We need all the chaos we can get." Back on his flagship, Jake gathered his top officers. "Listen up, we have one shot at this. We're going to hit Taurus's command ship directly." Novak's eyes widened. "Sir, that's suicide. Their defenses—" "We'll be occupied with our main assault," Jake cut him off. I need you to modify our slipstream drive. Get us as close as possible before they can react. Novak hesitated, then nodded. I'll need to jury-rig some Pandronian tech we captured. It's risky, but I'll make it work. As Novak set to work, Jake assembled his strike team. Battle-hardened Marines and ace pilots, each hand-picked for this desperate mission. I won't lie to you, Jake addressed them. This is a long shot, but it's our only chance to save Earth. Are you with me? A chorus of affirmatives rang out. Jake nodded, pride swelling in his chest. Hours ticked by as they made their preparations. Reports from Earth grew increasingly dire. Massive swathes of cities reduced to rubble. Millions huddled in underground shelters. Sir, Chen called out suddenly. Taurus is redirecting ships. I think he's onto us. Jake's eyes narrowed. Novak, we're out of time. Are we ready? The engineer wiped sweat from his brow. As ready as we'll ever be. But Jake, if my calculations are off by even a fraction, then we're dead either way, Jake finished. He took a deep breath. All hands brace for slipstream jump. Reality twisted around them as they plunged into the chaotic depths of slipspace. Jake's squeezing hardened as he gripped his chair, willing them through. They erupted into real space in the midst of Taurus's fleet. For a heartbeat, there was stunned silence on both sides. Jake's voice cut through the shock. Target their main engines. Fire everything we've got. Human weapons lashed out, catching the massive Pandronian command ship completely off guard. Its shields flared and failed under the onslaught. Taurus's enraged bellow filled the comms. How dare you! I'll flay the flesh from your bones, James! But even as Pandronian ships scrambled to respond, alarms blared across their fleet. Supply ships failed to arrive. Weapons systems malfunctioned. Hudson's sabotage was paying off in spades. Jake's voice was steel as he issued orders. All ships, form up on me. We're taking that command ship down. Human vessels surged forward, guns blazing. Pandronians fought back viciously, but their formation was in disarray. Jake's strike force punched through their lines, zeroing in on their true target. The space around Taurus's crippled Leviathan erupted into a maelstrom of weapons fire. Fighters dueled at point-blank range, while capital ships traded broadsides. Jake's flagship burst out of slipspace, alarms blaring as the sudden transition rocked the vessel. Through the view screen, the massive bulk of Taurus's command Leviathan loomed before them, its weapons already firing. All ships, attack pattern Omega! Jake shouted, his hands flying across the tactical display. Concentrate fire on their main engines. Human vessels surged forward, guns blazing. The space around the alien behemoth erupted into a maelstrom of weapons fire. Fighters weaved between capital ships, plasma bolts and missiles crisscrossing the void. Jake watched as the first salvo struck home. The Leviathan's shields flared and failed, leaving its vulnerable hull exposed. Explosions rippled along its massive engines, leaving the Titanic vessel drifting. We've got our opening, Jake said, turning to his assembled strike team. Let's move. They raced to the hangar bay, boarding their assault shuttle. As they launched, Jake saw dozens of other human craft doing the same, all hurtling towards the crippled Leviathan. The shuttle bucked and shuddered as Pandronian point defense fire filled the space around them. Jake gritted his teeth, watching as several human ships erupted into fireballs. With a bone-jarring impact, their shuttle slammed into the Leviathan's hull. Cutting torches flared to life, carving through the alien metal. Breaching in 3, 2, 1, go. Jake led the charge, plasma rifle at the ready. They poured into the alien corridor, immediately met by a hail of enemy fire. Praetorian Guard shock troopers swarmed towards them, their chitinous armor gleaming in the harsh light. Push forward, Jake shouted, ducking behind a bulkhead as energy bolts scorched the air around him. He leaned out, squeezing off a burst that dropped 2 Pandronians. The human commandos fought with desperate intensity, knowing the fate of Earth hung in the balance. They clawed their way deeper into the Leviathan, leaving a trail of alien corpses in their wake. Jake's comm crackled to life. Sir, we've taken auxiliary fire control, Lieutenant Chen reported, her voice strained. Moving on to the next target. Good work, Jake replied, gesturing his team forward. We're heading for the main bridge. Taurus ends this here and now. They battled through winding corridors and vast chambers, disabling critical systems as they went. Jake lost count of how many Pandronians fell to his rifle, his world narrowing to the next target, the next objective. Suddenly, the deck beneath them shuddered. Jake stumbled, catching himself on a nearby console. "What was that?" one of his Marines asked. Jake's eyes widened as he saw the tactical display. "Taurus's reinforcements, they're here." But it was too late for the Pandronians. Human boarding parties had already seized key positions throughout the Leviathan. Jake pushed his team harder, knowing their window of opportunity was closing. They burst onto the bridge in a storm of plasma fire and grenades. Pandronian officers fell before they could even raise their weapons. And there, at the center of it all, stood Taurus himself. The alien warlord towered over Jake, his battlesuit gleaming with arcane technology. Taurus's mandibles clicked in fury as he regarded the human intruders. "You dare?" Taurus roared, his voice shaking the very deck plates. "I will crush you myself, James." Jake raised his rifle, but Taurus moved with shocking speed. A massive clawed hand batted the weapon aside, sending it clattering across the bridge. "Just you and me now," Jake said, falling into a fighting stance. Taurus charged, his augmented strength threatening to overwhelm Jake in an instant. But the human commander was ready. He ducked and weaved, using the alien's momentum against him. All around them, the battle for the Leviathan raged on. Human and Pandronian forces clashed in desperate close-quarters combat. Jake caught glimpses of the fight as he danced away from Taurus's furious attacks. His comm buzzed again. "Jake, it's Hudson. We've taken out the last of their logistics hubs. Taurus's fleet is dead in the water." Jake allowed himself a grim smile, even as he narrowly avoided a blow that would have taken his head off. "Copy that, Mike. Keep up the pressure." The duel continued, neither combatant able to gain a decisive advantage. Jake's tactical mind raced, looking for any opening he could exploit. Suddenly, his earpiece crackled again. This time it was Weston's voice, tinged with hope for the first time in days. "Jake, the orbital bombardment has stopped. We're counterattacking on all fronts." Jake felt a surge of pride, knowing humanity was fighting back. But he couldn't afford to lose focus. Taurus pressed his attack, driving Jake back step by step. "It's over, human!" Taurus snarled, his claws slashing the air inches from Jake's face. "Your species ends here." Jake saw his chance. As Taurus lunged forward, overextending himself, Jake twisted to the side. In one fluid motion, he struck at the weak point Novak had identified, a small gap in the alien's battlesuit where power conduits met. His fist connected, and Taurus howled in pain and rage. The alien warlord stumbled, his movement suddenly jerky and uncoordinated. Jake pressed his advantage, landing blow after blow on the staggered Pandronian. With a final, desperate surge of strength, he drove Taurus to the ground. The alien lay there broken and defeated. Jake stood over him, chest heaving from exertion. "Stand down," Jake said, his voice carrying across the now silent bridge. "It's finished." He turned to the nearest console, broadcasting on all frequencies. "This is Commander Jake James to all Pandronian forces. Your leader is defeated. Withdraw immediately or face total destruction." As the last of the alien ships fled, trailing debris and venting atmosphere, Jake allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. The battle was won, but the war for humanity's survival was just the beginning. Jake stood on the bridge of his battered flagship, his eyes fixed on the console. The once mighty Pandronian command ship drifted before him, its hull torn open in a dozen places, internal fires still raging. Taurus lay at Jake's feet, his alien form crumpled and broken. "All Pandronian forces," Jake's voice rang out across every comm channel. "Your leader is defeated. Retreat immediately or face total annihilation." He watched as the remaining enemy ships fled, their engines flaring as they pushed beyond Mars' orbit. but the victory felt hollow. Jake turned to survey his own fleet, and his throat tightened. Human warships floated lifelessly, their hulls shattered and venting atmosphere. Debris from both sides littered space around them. Jake's tactical display showed the grim tally. Over half their fleet destroyed or crippled beyond repair. "Sir," Lieutenant Chen's voice cracked as she spoke, "casualty reports are coming in." Jake steeled himself as he read the numbers. Thousands of pilots and crew lost, and his strike team. He clenched his fists, remembering the faces of those who'd fought beside him to reach Taurus. "What's the situation on Earth?" Jake asked, dreading the answer. The view screen shifted, showing feeds from the planet's surface. Jake's heart sank. Where great cities once stood, only smoking craters remained. Crowds gathered in the streets, their initial cheers of victory giving way to wails of anguish as the true cost became clear. Dr. Novak's face appeared on the screen, his eyes red-rimmed. "Jake, it's bad. The bombardment didn't just destroy our cities. It's pushed Earth's entire ecosystem to the brink of collapse. Atmospheric composition, ocean acidity, global temperatures, everything's going haywire." Jake opened his mouth to respond, but another alert cut him off. "Sir," Chen called out, "we're receiving transmissions from multiple sectors. It's incredible." The tactical display lit up with new data points. Across former Pandronian territory, subjugated worlds were rising up. Inspired by humanity's stand, oppressed species were throwing off their chains. Jake's mind raced. This was their chance, perhaps their only chance, to break the Pandronian Empire for good. But Earth. He turned to Weston and Novak, his voice low. "We need to make a decision, right now." Jake laid out his plan. Not to focus on rebuilding Earth, but to press their advantage and crush the Pandronians once and for all. To liberate countless worlds and ensure this threat could never rise again. Weston's face contorted in anguish. "Jake, you can't be serious. Earth is our home. We can't just abandon it." "Look at the data," Jake said, his voice steady. "Earth is already lost. But out there, we can save billions. We can end this, for good." The debate raged for hours. Voices raised in anger, in grief, in desperation. But in the end, the cold logic of Jake's argument won out. "Do it," Weston said, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Jake nodded, turning to address what remained of humanity's forces. "All ships, this is Commander James. Prep for immediate departure. We're taking the fight to the enemy." As evacuation orders went out across Earth, the human fleet surged forward. They struck Pandronian strongholds with brutal efficiency, liberating world after world. Each victory brought new allies to their cause, swelling their ranks. Months passed in a blur of battles and narrow escapes. Jake pushed himself and his forces to the limit, always one step ahead of the enemy. And slowly, inexorably, the Pandronian Empire began to crumble. The final battle unfolded over Taurus's throne world, a planet as lifeless and cold as its master's heart. Jake watched from his command chair as the Pandronian warlord made his last desperate stand. Taurus's voice boomed across the comms, full of impotent rage. "You think this is victory, human? You've doomed your own world. Your people will be forgotten." Jake didn't respond. He simply gave the order to fire. Hours later, it was over. The last Pandronian ships were either captured or destroyed. Jake stood face to face with Taurus one final time, watching the light fade from the alien's eyes. As the adrenaline of battle faded, the weight of what they'd done, what they'd sacrificed, settled over Jake and his crew. They'd won, but at what cost? Weston's hologram flickered to life on the bridge. "It's time, Jake. The last transports are ready to leave Earth." Jake nodded, unable to speak. He boarded a shuttle, descending to the surface of the world that had birthed him, the planet he'd given everything to save, only to lose in the end. He stood on cracked, barren Earth that had once been green and vibrant. Jake placed a simple stone marker in the ground, carved with words that seemed woefully inadequate. "Earth, cradle of humanity, never forgotten." As Jake turned to leave, he paused. In a small crevice near the monument, a tiny green shoot had pushed its way through the ruined soil, impossibly, defiantly alive.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.